What do you see when you drive around the Tri-Valley? Nice homes, great schools, sports parks, vineyards, attractive downtown areas? These are all easy to spot. Today, we would like you to see our community through the eyes of our local Compassion Ministry partner organizations.
Do you see what I see? I see lots of teenagers who are trying to figure out where their sense of worth and value, where their boundaries are, how to really see their future goals and dreams become realities. I have the privilege of going into the classrooms on public high school campuses and private high school campuses as well, and just talking to teenagers about life and about the future and about making choices. And some of the questions I ask them allow me to receive answers that are pretty sad and troubling. I'll walk into a classroom and I'll ask students, how many of you know other students who are experimenting with drugs or are using alcohol on a regular basis or are engaged in some form of sexual activity? And without fail, no matter what school we're at, whether it's up in Walnut Creek or all the way down to Livermore, we see every hand in the classroom go up. They all know students who are making some potentially dangerous choices with their lives. And so that's why Teen Esteem is such a valuable and powerful program.
Do you see what I see? Here in the Tri-Valley, where we have such affluence, we have a lot of poverty also. We're Open Heart Kitchen, and this year alone, we will feed over 300,000 meals to those in need right here in the Tri-Valley area, Dublin, Pleasanton, and Livermore. You may ask, who are these people and where do they come from? They come from here. They're not flocking in to use our program. They're right here. They've lived here for generations. We feed all those in need. We feed veterans. We feed seniors. We feed children. We feed families who are barely making it. We feed the homeless. We feed those that are your neighbors. Poverty is very hidden here in the Tri-Valley area, and we see it every day.
Do you see what I see? Every day, I see Open Heart Kitchen making a difference in someone's life. One meal can put a smile on someone's face.
Do you see what I see? I see students coming to school in poverty and being afraid of asking for help because they feel embarrassed. I see other students hungry and not being able to focus at school. I see others that need help at home, but parents don't speak English and they can progress in their classes. I can see others that need medical attention, but they can't afford to pay for a doctor.
Do you see what I see? Every day I see parents who desperately want to help their students but can't due to language or technical barriers. By volunteering, you could literally help a child move from a life of poverty to one of prosperity. When we think Pleasanton, we rarely think poverty. But the truth is, more than 900 families here are living in poverty. The greatest solution to ending this is education. You have the opportunity to help to provide basic necessities and homework and help the students like Katie have every opportunity to succeed. Katie is the first child in her family to go to college. Her mom cleans houses and dad is a gardener. Neither speaks English, so they could not help with her homework. She had none of the resources that most of students have. But with an opportunity and a little bit of help, she made it and received a full scholarship from Santa Clara University. Imagine how rewarding it is to think of a student like Katie and say yes, one more.
Do you see what I see? Every day, I see a senior who's in their home who can't make it out to the grocery store to get basic necessities. Every day, I see a senior who has a medical appointment and is in need of care but doesn't have the means to find the transportation to get there. Do you see what I see? I see seniors who are wonderful assets to our community but just need that extra assistance to make ends meet.
Do you see what I see? I see women like Shannon every day. Women who are in need of help, who are trying to flee domestic violence, who are trying to recover from addiction, or who are homeless and have no place to go at night.
Do you see what I see? I see a family with a special needs child, and I see that they're aching from loneliness and exhaustion because their child is different and people are pulling away from them socially. There's no support. Their child is never invited to a birthday party or a sleepover, and they're exhausted from having to physically care for this child's needs 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It just never stops. And they need us to be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Ultimately, we want to see what Jesus sees. We want to see the needs in our community through the eyes of Jesus. And we want to reach out with love and generosity to those who Jesus calls the least of these in our community. The poor, the hungry, the sick, the uneducated, the prisoner, the orphan, the widow, the jobless, and the homeless. A fundamental mark of the people of God is extending compassion to people who are hurting. Blue Oaks, let us reflect the compassion we see and experience in Jesus, and let us become a church known for its irrational generosity in this community.
You know, there are certain regrets in life that fall under the category of what might be called, if only I had known it was you. I would have behaved differently if only I had known it was you. Imagine you're single and a friend says, I just want you to trust me on this. I want you to go on a blind date with this girl. She's a really nice girl. She has a great personality, but you've been burned before, and so you say no. And sometime later, you meet her, and it turns out to be Emma Watson or Heidi Klum or someone like that. Do you think you might have some regrets? How many of you are married and you would say, as I would say, I have no regrets because I married someone far more attractive than Heidi Klum? Would you raise your hand? You want to raise it real fast because you don't want to make it look like you have to think about that one. If only I had known it was you. Lee Strobel writes about his dad and how his dad was approached one time by a paper cup salesman to invest $950 in a scheme that was guaranteed to pay off big time, guaranteed. Well, his dad had been around the block a few times, and he wasn't about to throw away $1,000 on something like that. Well, this salesman was a guy who turned out to be Ray Kroc, and the investment would have been to be one of the initial investors in a company called McDonald's. Lee Strobel said he cries every time he tells that story. If only I had known it was you. An author wrote one time that Mark Twain was returning home from a very successful 3 weeks of fishing in Maine. And although the fishing season in Maine was closed, Twain decided he was going to fish anyway. On the train ride home, he started bragging about his very large catch to the only other person who was in the club car, who was actually not very enthusiastic about it. And finally, Twain asked him, by the way, who are you? The man said, I'm the game warden of the state of Maine. Who are you? And Twain nearly swallowed his cigar. He said, to be perfectly honest, warden, I'm the biggest liar in the whole United States. I would have never done what I did. I would have never said what I said if only I'd known it was you. But I think the ultimate regret story along these lines is one that Jesus told over 2,000 years ago. It might be the single most sobering story that Jesus ever told. And I want to put it in somewhat modern terms today, but it's Jesus' story. If you want to read it, you can go home and read it. It's in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. It has to do with the fact that Jesus said to those listening that one day he's going to return to this earth and all the angels are going to come with him and he will come in power and there will be no doubt about his authority on that day. And he'll separate all human beings the way that a shepherd would separate the sheep from the goats. The sheep on his right, the goats on his left. This is a story about a king. And Jesus says, the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world, because I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was illiterate and you taught me how to read. I had no work and you helped me get training. I was old and sick and alone in a nursing home, and you came to visit me. I was on the streets, and you helped me find a place to live. I was sitting in prison. I was regarded as a convict, to be feared or shunned, and you came to visit me, and you gave me hope. And then Jesus says, the king will turn to those on his left, and the king will say, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was starving, and you knew about it, but you looked the other way and pretended like you didn't see. I was hopelessly illiterate, and you didn't lift a finger to help me learn how to read. I was without work, but all you really cared about was your career. I was alone and old and sitting in a nursing home. You forgot I was there. I was living on the street, but your house was on a much nicer street. I was in prison, but your only concern was to make sure that my prison didn't get built in your backyard. Jesus says that those on his left will be quite surprised by these words, and they'll say, when did we ever see you like that? Like, I don't remember ever seeing you like that. I don't remember ever experiencing that. When did we treat you like that? If only I'd known it was you. And Jesus will say, whatever you did for the least of these, your brothers and sisters, you did it for me. And whatever you did not do for the least of these, your brothers and sisters, you did not do it for me. Imagine carrying that kind of regret into eternity. Now, Jesus is not saying in this story that you earn your way into heaven by doing good deeds. He's saying the ultimate test of a transformed life is a compassionate heart. The way you and I know we're fulfilling our mission as a church, that we're becoming more Christ-centered, is we're growing compassionate hearts. The Apostle John put it like this in 1 John 4, 20 and 21. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And he has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister. And this is why when we started this church about 2.5 years ago, and we were deciding what our core values would be, what would matter the most to us, compassion was on the top of the list. We said we will generously provide love and resources to our broken world, beginning in our own community. And that's why 9 months ago we started a community needs assessment, which consisted of Blue Oaks volunteers interviewing community members and leaders throughout the Tri-Valley. We interviewed business leaders and medical professionals and nonprofit leaders and teachers and elected officials and many others. Our desire was to discover unmet needs in our community so that we can reach out with compassion and give generously to organizations that are seeking to bring healing to those who are hurting in our community. We believe God has led us to 6 organizations that are making a significant difference in our community. And you can read about those organizations in the Compassion booklet that you got on your way in. These organizations will provide opportunities for us as individuals and as groups and as families to do what Jesus describes in Matthew 25, to give generously to the least of these in our community. You know, anytime I see another human being in need, someone who's loaded down with a burden, someone who's at the bottom, someone who's different than me, I have a choice. I can reach out with compassion. I can notice. I can see. I can feel. I can hear. I can pray. I can care. I can serve. I can. I can reach out with compassion, or I can avoid them. I can just withdraw. I can just look the other way. I can reach out, or I can avoid. And I'll tell you, one of the most sobering parts of what Jesus said in Matthew 25, Jesus doesn't say to the goats, you oppress the least of these. He doesn't say, you went around burning crosses in yards. He doesn't say, you robbed them and engaged in violent acts against them. He doesn't say, you did bad things at all. He just said, you did nothing. You looked the other way. You decided that having a bigger house or a nicer car was worth working hard, but helping other people was not worth working very hard. You decided that you had more important things in your life to do. But the reality is you were wrong, Jesus says. The day is coming, I believe, when you and I will regret that more than anything else you can imagine. Now, I think everyone in this room wants to build a heart of compassion. I really do. I believe that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today. My bet is even if you're not sure about God, even if you're still kind of seeking in your spiritual life, you want to be a person who has a compassionate heart. You want to extend a hand of compassion. So what do you do? I'm going to get very concrete now because I know that almost everyone in this room leads a busy life. You have commitments that you can't just walk away from in this life. So how do you build a more compassionate heart? I just want to give you one thought. And this is from a man named Jim Wallace, who is one of the great Christian leaders in our day in this area. He wrote a book called Faith Works, and he gives a kind of starting point for people who want to build compassionate hearts. And so I want to tell you the phrase, and then I want to unpack it a little bit. This is what he said. You've got to get out of the house more often. And here's the idea. We all tend to live in a little slice of the world that we feel comfortable in. I go to my school, I shop in my area, I work in my area, I go to my church, I do things with people who are like me. Our society just divides people up that way. It puts all these kinds of subtle barriers in between all different kinds of people. And as long as I don't get out of the house, people who live in other conditions, people who are different from me, different languages, different accent, different skin color, different economic conditions, they're just not on my radar screen. They're not in my heart. They're not in my mind. Most people who are deeply committed to the ministry of compassion, who are building bigger hearts and trying to reach out as Jesus did, most of those people can trace their heart back to a transformational time in their life when they actually went to someone in need. Maybe it was on a mission trip. Maybe it was on a service project. Maybe it was something that got them out of their comfort zone, where they had a real experience with a real person, they learned a real name, they met a real face. Usually what transforms people and motivates them to reach out with compassion is not a great talk. It's not a good book, it's not a powerful documentary, it's not a moving film. It's a real life experience that grips your heart and seizes your vision and immerses you into the life of a real person. You got to get out of the house. And I have a very deep conviction that if you will do that, if you'll get out of whatever is in your normal, comfortable world, if you serve and you pray for a real person with a real name, your heart's going to be changed. God will just work in you that way if you reach out with compassion. You'll begin to think about how you might do that or how you might serve someone, not because you ought to do it, because you're motivated to do it from within. On the other hand, I'm here to tell you today that if you don't do that, if you don't take this step, if you don't get out of the house, your attention will just be devoted to other things. It just will. And over time, your heart will get smaller and colder. And the day is coming when you will face a mountain of regret, not so much for the bad things that you did, but for the wonderful things that you didn't do. Lisa Lee Acasos is a woman in our church who has helped start a ministry for families with special needs in our community. And she's getting out of the house on a regular basis. And I just want you to hear her story. Check it out.
I work as a substitute teacher. And 15 years ago, the first time I was called into a special needs classroom, God just totally opened my heart to these children. A regularly abled child goes to soccer practice or baseball practice or music lessons or dance lessons or is on a swim team or likes drama. A special needs child never is invited to a birthday party or a slumber party or even a backyard barbecue picnic. These families are exhausted and they are so needing the hands-on love and care that we can provide just by taking their child for an afternoon. There's a mom, she's got 3 kids, and she shows up to our respite care and she has 1 disabled child and 2 regularly able children, and she's exhausted. She looks like she's 65 years old, she's 30. If you're a woman, you understand that that's not a good thing. What happens is we take these kids and we give them one-on-one care. We hook them up with a buddy, and they are allowed to play, to make crafts, to have a snack, to play on musical instruments for as long and as loud as they like. They're given sing-alongs and parachute time and outdoor time and indoor time and one-on-one attention for both the sibling and the special needs child. Meanwhile, the parent gets to go off and do something alone for 3 to 3.5 hours. The one mom that I'm talking about made it all the way out to the parking lot, got into her car, and fell asleep, passed out. She slept for 3.5 hours, and when she came back, she was a completely different person. She had finally had 3 straight hours of sleep for the first time in 9 years. Caring for an emotionally disturbed or a special needs child is a 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And when I say 24 hours, I mean she gets up 6 times a night. So her sleep is interrupted. That 3.5 hours was so precious to her. So when she came back in at the end of our respite, all 3 kids are all over her saying, when can we come back again? We loved it, we loved it. We got to do this, we got to do that. I made a new friend, I made 2 new friends. And because of that, we showed her the hands and feet of Jesus. We showed her what it's like when a human being steps up and cares, physically cares, and donates their time to give her respite. So just by playing with a child for 3.5 hours, we were able to take care of her needs and give her a respite. And that's really what it's all about.
So that's one person who's getting out of the house. And I just want to tell you, there's something that happens when you get out. There's something that happens in you. There's something that happens to this world when you get out. In the book by Jim Wallace that I mentioned, he tells a story about a lawyer named Dale, who's kind of a big deal. And he had an income in the high 6 figures, and he began to get out of the house one day. And it changed his life. He started working at the Good News Soup Kitchen in Tallahassee. And this is what he writes. I showed up every day in my suit to help from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. They assigned me door duty. My job was to make sure street people lined up to eat and waited in an orderly fashion. Every day I stood at the door for an hour chatting with the street people waiting to eat. Before I came to Good News, a street person was just like a meaningless term. It defined a group of people that, without defining anybody in particular from the comfort of my car or my suburban home or my downtown office, street people were just those people out there somewhere. Then one day, an elderly woman named Helen came running to the Good News door. A man was chasing her and threatening to kill her if she didn't give him back her dollar. Tell him he can't hit me because it's church property, she pleaded. In true lawyerly fashion, I explained that Good News is not actually a church, but he still couldn't hit her. After 20 minutes of failed mediation, I bought peace by giving them each $1. That evening, I happened to be standing on the corner of Park and Monroe, and in the red twilight, I spied a lonely silhouette struggling in my direction from Tennessee Street. A poor street person, I thought, as the figure inched closer. I was about to turn back to my own concerns when I detected something familiar in that shadowy figure, the red scarf, the clear plastic bag with white border, the mismatched shoes. My God, I said in my thought, that's Helen. My eyes froze on her as she limped by and turned up to Park. No doubt that she will crawl under a bush and spend the night. My mind had always dismissed the sight of a street person in seconds, but I couldn't expel the picture of Helen. That night, as I lay in my deluxe temperature-controlled bed, I couldn't sleep. A voice kept asking, "Where's Helen sleeping tonight?" No street person had ever interfered with my sleep before. But the shadowy figure with the red scarf and the plastic bag and the mismatched shoes had followed me home. I made the fatal mistake. I learned her name. And that's what happens when you get involved. You learn someone's name, and when you learn someone's name, you're never quite the same. I learned a name this week. There was a homeless man named David who called our office on Monday morning. He called to say thank you to whoever gave him the money and the Blue Oaks homeless kit on Sunday night when he was sleeping. He was sleeping, and then he woke up to this bag and the, I think, $5 bill. And he was extremely grateful, and so he wanted to call our church to express his gratitude. So whoever gave that to him, he says thank you, and so does Jesus. Several months ago, we assembled kits to keep in our cars in case we run into someone in need. We said, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And so we carry these kits with us, and we're ready to give when that time comes. By the way, today we have enough supplies in the courtyard to assemble 300 more kits. And 65 of these kits are going to go to the homeless at City Team. 80 of them are for senior support program in our community. And then we have about 150 that you can take with you. If you don't have one, I encourage you to assemble a kit and take it with you. You know, another thing we're doing today is we're handing out bags for our food drive next Sunday. Be sure to take one of those on your way out. I know we have a lot going on today. But I want to point something out about this food drive bag. Each of the bags has a letter, and I want to encourage you to use this to invite a coworker or neighbor to participate in this food drive. I don't know which one of you wrote this letter, but someone wrote a letter. We saw it was attached to a bag, and we loved it so much that we put it on all of our bags so that you can use it to invite someone to participate. It's a great way to reach out and invite someone to Blue Oaks next Sunday. All right, I want you to learn a couple more names today. I want you to meet Rosemary. She's a homeless woman who lives out of her car in Livermore. And I want you to meet Shannon. She's a woman who was a victim of domestic violence and addiction, and she had her life completely transformed by the ministry of Shepherd's Gate.
I came to Shepherd's Gate in June of 2010 from Las Vegas. At that point in my life, I had gone through just a lot of dark times, brokenness. I got into some addictions, and God literally just reached down and picked me up by my bootstraps, and He opened a door here at Shepherd's Gate, and I came here and went through an amazing time of just healing and restoration.
A divorce. Basically, a judge thought that it was best that my ex got all 3 kids, and as we speak, he doesn't have any of them. The 2 older have gone on their way. The courts can't help them, but the younger one is with foster care right now. And if I had a place, I could have my son right now, but I don't. It is what it is. A lot of people don't believe that I'm homeless. I've been homeless in my car for 6 years. It's very difficult, but I don't let that stop me from trying to be as normal as I can. And I'm a working homeless. I work, I pay my taxes. I volunteer. I do things to make my life as pleasant as it can be under the circumstances.
I graduated from the program in May of 2011, and when I look back on my life and my experience here at Shepherd's Gate, I just think of a very nice time of rest, because that's what it was. It was just, I feel like the Holy Spirit just touched my life and healed me from just every brokenness, and now I'm just very grateful and have joy. And every class that we have here at Shepherd's Gate, every therapy session, every staff member was just amazing, and everything that I went through, every experience, no matter how difficult it may have been, it was the most amazing time of my life, because I am now a different person, and now I can live out my life and help others who go through the same situations that I went through.
Open Heart Kitchen has the great volunteers, the people that are behind those counters scooping up our food. I mean, they always have a smile on their face. And, a lot of people, when they come in here, we're not always happy. We're depressed or whatever, myself included. And to see another person on the other side of the counter scooping the food up for you and then smiling, that's why they call it Open Heart.
If Shepherd's Gate didn't exist or, was not here, my life would either be very different, or I might not even be alive right now, because it literally did save my life in every aspect of the word. I have never in my whole life heard of another place like this or been or experienced anything like it. So I feel like it's not only for giving, but whoever has come here has been blessed as well. Not only is it a program that helps women rebuild their lives, but it also gives us an opportunity to give back after the fact. So it's been an amazing journey for me, and I'm just grateful to the Lord and to Shepherd's Gate and to all of you. You have no idea how much just giving and just being a part or volunteering changes even one person's life.
We need to have more places like this so that people can feel safe. Like, for example, when I work on my car to keep it straightened up and as neat and tidy as I can make it, I always can come here and use the parking lot and straighten up without feeling like, oh, I'm being watched. Whereas if I was in a parking lot like Walmart or Safeway, it's more people will look at you, and then people look down on you too, like, what'd you do to deserve this? I would say people should volunteer so they could really see with their own eyes what is happening around. Maybe they don't see when they're in their own homes or, but there's a lot of stuff that we could use help with in our own community.
We need to see faces and we need to learn names, because that's what's going to make a difference. And I'll tell you why it makes a difference is because you see that face and you realize that's someone who's created in the image of God. And you learn that name and you realize that's a name of someone who Jesus Christ died for. Because Jesus said in some way that we don't fully understand, that when you extend a hand to someone, no matter how ragged they may look to you, Jesus says, what you've done to them, you've done it to me. Mother Teresa used to send members of her community to a home for the dying, and she wrote of a young woman from a well-to-do family who spent 3 hours caring for a dying man who was brought in from the streets, who was covered with maggots. And Mother Teresa said to this young woman, you be very careful. You be very careful. You be very loving as you touch him, for Jesus is there in his distressing disguise. And that's why when you get out of the house and you learn a name and you see a face, it changes you, for Jesus is there in the distressing disguises of the poor. And that's why we are utterly committed to building a church of men and women who reach out with compassion. This is just core to the message of Jesus Christ. For the last couple of years, for us, this has been kind of a dream. But this year, it's not a dream anymore. I mean, we're rolling up our sleeves. We're going to find ways to help each other. For anyone else who calls Blue Oaks their home church, we're going to help you get out of the house. And not only are we going to do that, we're going to listen and we're going to learn and we're going to team up with some outstanding organizations that are making a great difference in our community. We're going to address spiritual needs and economic challenges and educational demands, community development, social structures, and we're going to do this in a way that increasingly brings strength and honor and respect and growth to everyone involved. And together, we're going to make a difference. We can't do everything, but we can do something. And as of today, we have 6 local partners, 1 regional partner and 1 global partner. We're partnering with organizations that involve senior care and food pantries and homeless care and housing and job programs and tutoring. And we're thinking about helping an organization to revitalize the Oakland Raiders. Next week, because they need to lose to the 49ers today. But you know what matters is not so much what this organization or any organization can point to on an org chart. What matters is that we become a community of men and women who boldly extend compassion to people who are in need. It's got to happen. It's got to happen for you. It's got to happen for me. And so I'm here this morning really to give you just one challenge. Get out of the house. I don't know what your next step is. Maybe it involves a first serve. Similar to the first serve opportunities that we have at Blue Oaks, we're going to provide first serve opportunities with our compassion partners. These are opportunities to visit with some of our partners and just get to know them. And get to learn some faces, get to learn some names. Maybe you need to check out the opportunities before you commit to serving. So sign up for a first serve and kind of evaluate where you might best fit. Now, for every parent here, I just want to make a real strong plea. Get your kids involved. Get your kids involved. They need it. How many of you have had or have teenagers around the house? Would you raise your hand? All right. How many of them have ever been to Stone Ridge Mall? Would you raise your hand? Now, I'm going to tell you something, and it's not a bad thing to go to Stone Ridge Mall. But the more time you spend in a mall, the more your heart will say, I need, I want, I've got to have. And that's just the way it is. It's the way it is for me. That's the way it is for you. It's the way it is for all of us. And we need to take our little hearts to some places that will cause them to say other things. We need to take our hearts and we need to take our kids' hearts to these places where their hearts will learn to say things like, I care, I weep, I've got to give, I've got to serve. I've got to make my life about something bigger than my own success or my own comfort. I've gone to Africa, where we've had the opportunity to care for orphans and widows and homeless street kids and the sick who are in desperate need of medical care and nutrition. I've taken groups to visit senior centers where we've had the opportunity to play games with seniors and talk baseball with guys who rarely get visitors. I've taken groups to serve the homeless in Livermore, and just being out there with the least of these will change your heart. It really will. But you've got to get out of the house. And this is just one more talk, just like one more piece of information that comes and goes, and you don't get out of the house. Over time, what's going to happen to your heart is it's just going to get a little bit smaller. And one day, you're going to face this mountain of regret. Today we have representatives from our ministry partners here on campus, and I just want to challenge you, if you just take a few minutes after we're done here to meet one of our partner organizations in the courtyard. You can stop by one of the tables, you can meet someone, you can get some information about the organization, you can decide to take a next step, you can just say thank you. Just see a face that's actually serving Jesus in our community and just say, I'm so glad to be partnering with you. Thank you for all that you do to serve our community. I know you have a lot of things to do. Just take 1 minute or a few minutes after the service to meet someone. To those of you who are already deeply involved in reaching out with compassion, I just want to say a word to you. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're discouraged because that work is not easy. I just want you to hear one thing. It's worth it. What you do is worth it. I promise you, at the end of your life, you will not regret one act of compassion. You will not regret one moment that you spent, $1 that you gave, one tear that you shed. You will not regret any of it because compassion is Jesus' way of life. And every one of us who knows and follows him has been on the receiving end of his compassion. You see, I don't fully understand the story that Jesus told until I realize I too am one of the least of these. This is not a story about big, strong, clever, adequate, bright people helping little, weak, helpless, grateful, dependent people. And people who enter compassion ministries with the romanticized picture about how my strength and my adequacy will bring like magic, easy solutions to people who are classified as needy, that's just not going to last very long. In his story, Jesus does not divide the human race up into strong, confident people and weak, dependent people. I have my own brokenness. I have my own neediness, my own blindness, and I believe that the greatest poverty of all is the poverty of spirit. It's the poverty of compassion. And that can coexist with a real big bank account and real high-functioning titles. And so one day, Jesus looked around at this world that he saw when he saw all the need and the hunger and the loneness and the sin and the guilt and the poverty. And Jesus lived, and think about this, Jesus lived at the right hand of God in unspeakable glory and splendor, and Jesus said to himself, I've got to get out of the house. And he crossed every barrier and boundary to extend himself in love to every human being, anyone who would want to receive him. He came to the city, he came to the suburb, he came to the hood, to the barrio, to the mall. He came to people in need like me, for I too am one of the least of these, and so are you. Jesus comes to us, and then he says, now why don't you do what I do? Why don't you devote your life to developing and building a heart of compassion? Why don't you extend a hand? Why don't you open your eyes? Why don't you learn some names? Why don't you join my team? Jesus says the people with the biggest regret factor in the end of the world will be the people who say, if only I'd known it was you. And I'll tell you today, you'll never be in that position because now you know. So go home, but don't forget to get out of the house. Go do a first serve with one of our partner organizations, see a face, learn a name, say a prayer, shed a tear, build a heart, extend a hand, change a world. All right, now I want you to take out your compassion booklet and go to the last page. I just want to point out this last page. It's an interest form. These are your next steps for this week, okay? Read this compassion booklet, It's a list of all of our partner organizations. You can learn more about them. And then we're asking that you make a commitment, that you pray, give, and or serve. And then the next thing we'd like you to do is complete that interest form so that we have an idea of where the interests are within our church and how we're going to be involved in serving in 2015. You can fill it out there, or you can go to our website at blueoaks.cc/compassion, and you can fill it out online if that's easier. And I want to mention the area at the bottom that says Compassion International, so that you have an idea what we're talking about with that. We want to partner with a church in an international community. So somewhere around the world, we want to partner with a church and make a difference in a community. We want to go on trips to serve that community. We want to do things to build sustainability within that community. We want to sponsor children in that community. And so we want to know what your interests are in sponsoring a child from an international community that we sponsor as a church. And if you do, you'll have the unique opportunity to go on a trip and actually meet the child that you sponsor in that community. And then we also want to know what international area that you'd like us to consider. We don't have a specific country selected yet, but we're interested to hear from you. If you have a specific country in mind, just let us know. All right, and then you can turn that in the offering at any time in the next few weeks, or you can turn it in the courtyard at our compassion area, or you can, like I said earlier, go online. And if you have any questions, just stop by our compassion area in the courtyard. All right, now I want to switch gears and I want to talk about Christmas before we end. Next week, we start our Christmas series called The Gifts of Christmas. And you know, Christmas is a time of the year when people are the most open to going to church. Statistics will say that 25% of people will go to church when they're invited by a friend. And that's why we give you these invites. You have them in your bulletin. We say, use these to extend an invitation to a friend, family, coworker, or whoever. 25% will come to church if they're invited by a friend. And I think that statistic is way higher around Christmas time. And so be extending those invitations. And if you're the kind of person that will put a card like this at a table at a restaurant, you know, like you leave a tip and then you leave a card as well, would you make sure that you leave it with at least a 20% tip? Or wrap it in this represents me and Blue Oaks, okay? So wrap it in a $20 bill and leave it on the table, and we'll just have this place full of food servers on Christmas. That would be great. I'm also excited about next Sunday because we're going to give parents an idea that has the potential to change how you celebrate Christmas with your kids. It would be a great week to bring a family with little kids. And I hope you're seriously considering who you're going to bring with you to Christmas, specifically Christmas Eve. And I'm hoping, by the way, and I'm praying that we have more than 1,000 people here at our Christmas Eve services. Last year, we had 3 services in here on Christmas Eve, and they were all full, and so we're going to have 4 this year, and we're just hoping that God brings more than 1,000 people to Blue Oaks on Christmas Eve. And you may say, well, Matt's just about numbers. No, I'm not. I'm about people. Because every one of those numbers is a person, and every person is someone who matters to God. Every one of them has a name and a face and a story. Some of them are my friends and my neighbors and people that I love dearly, and some of them are yours. Every one of them is someone's daughter or son or husband or wife or child or parent. Every one of them is someone who could be eternally transformed by the message of the gospel. Every one of them is a potential soul that gets saved. Every one of them is a potential marriage that gets resurrected, a relationship that gets restored, a bondage that gets broken, a body or a mind that gets healed, a life that gets set free. And so I'm praying that our Christmas Eve services are filled with people who've not been touched yet, those who are the least of these spiritually, the lost, the marginalized, the broken, the sheep without a shepherd, the sick, the lonely, those who have been forgotten and tossed aside. And it's our responsibility to bring them. They're not going to come unless someone invites them, and they're not going to probably come unless someone brings them. So that's our responsibility. So let's just commit to making this season the biggest invite season that we've experienced yet as a church. all right? And we'll just see what God does. All right, let's pray as the ushers come forward to receive the offering and the band comes back out to lead us in one more song. God, we're so grateful for your compassion that reaches to us, the least of these. You've freed us from sin and guilt and from the consequences of that. And God, I pray that you would just burden us to reach out with compassion, to extend the same kind of compassion to the broken and the hurting in our community. God, thank you for these organizations that we get to partner with who are making a great difference. I pray that we would, as a church, help them to take their mission farther and faster, that we would see so many lives changed through the involvement of this church in these organizations. And God, I pray that that you would do things beyond what we could ever even hope or imagine, that you would give us as a church, as we reach out into this community, just irresistible influence in the lives of people. God, I pray that we would see your kingdom advanced in a real powerful way as we reach out with compassion. We look forward to what you're going to do. And God, as we celebrate Christmas, I pray that you would just fill this place with people who don't know you, people who need to experience your love and your grace, people who need to know why we celebrate Christmas, why Jesus Christ had to come to this earth. And I pray it would be life-changing for a lot of people in this community. And I ask for it in Jesus' name. Amen.